jump. All right, so before that, I did want to touch on your syllabus. So just a little bit of a summary. I know most of you may already know this if you've been doing practice exams, but if not, I've put this slide in there because I think it is very, very helpful to just understand exactly where your marks are coming from and what's in your exam, what's assessed where, and in what form. Because legal studies is one of those subjects where it's not just all the topics mixed and you can get basically an essay on any topic or an essay on any or like a multiple choice on any of the topics. It's very, very much split in terms of the different marks, and they let you know which topic, right? So for other subjects like business studies, you're kind of in question in terms of which topic you don't really know, so you have to prepare for it all. But for legal studies, you have been given where or which topics will be assessed in which section or question style. So like most exams, we do have a multiple choice section, we have a short answer section, and we have an essay section, but we have 3 essays, which is not like many other exams, which may only have 1 or 2 essays. This one has the 3. So multiple choice will be 100% without a doubt on crime and human rights. So 15 of those marks, or 15 of those questions, because they're all 1 mark each, will be coming from crime, and 5 of those marks will be coming from human rights. Okay, so that makes up the bulk of your 20 marks. You don't really have a choice with that. Obviously, we all know what multiple choice is. Short answers, we then move on to short answers, which the syllabus section is human rights. So human rights is your area that you will be assessed on. This is going to be 15 marks. It's going to be split up into a couple of questions. And again, you just have to do those short answer questions. That's not a choice. Essay number 1. Remember, we have 3 essays. Number 1 is a crime essay. It's worth 15 marks. And again, you don't have a choice. That one's compulsory to do. So within crime, it can be really any topic. So you would need to make sure that you are preparing for that. So having your legislation, your cases, your media, being able to understand all of the different topics in enough detail to be able to write an essay for it. Essay option 1. This one is 25 marks. So in legal studies, you will go through 2 options in terms of your syllabus, so 2 different topics. So for example, when I was in school, I went through family, and so family law and world order. But obviously, it's very much up to your teacher, your school, which topics or which options those are. So option number 1 is 25 marks. So you do get a choice with this one. So you're given 2 questions and you choose one of those questions and you answer it. And again, for the second one, 25 marks. And again, you choose one. So this exam is really, long exam. It's a lot of work. I feel like, 3 essays plus short answer plus multiple choice can be a little bit overwhelming, which is why sometimes students get a little bit stressed about it. But regardless, I think if you have enough practice, it should not be an issue. So, something that I did was I would always put in the work, put in the hours, put in that practice to make sure that I could do the best possible job to achieve the marks that I wanted to achieve. So yeah, that's basically a summary of where your 100 marks are coming from the legal studies exam. So all HSC courses have a syllabus that sets out what must be taught by your teacher and what can be examined by NESA, right? So you want to be able to make sure that you know exactly what you can be examined on, and your syllabus is literally a list of that. So using your syllabus as a list of, hey, I know this, I can tick this off, I can tick this off, actually, I'm not sure about this, let me highlight it. That is exactly what you should be doing in order to understand what you know, what you don't know, so that you can separate the two and then achieve success in terms of, okay, now I can focus on what I feel like I need to improve on, and then essentially go from there. So therefore your syllabus is your checklist. It is something that you use to tick or cross what you know and what you don't know. Remember that you cannot be assessed on anything outside of your syllabus. So HSC courses specifically are very syllabus heavy, meaning that they set out every single dot point that you need to know specifically. So I did a couple of HSC courses, so business studies, economics, legal studies, and for all of them I made sure that I really emphasized understanding the syllabus and making sure that I used it as a list to understand what I knew and what I did not know. My syllabus was so important. Whenever I would have a study session, it would be the first thing on my table, right? So it's really important, and I would highly recommend that you also implement the syllabus into every study session that you have. So structuring your notes also in terms of the syllabus is something that I wanted to quickly touch on as well. So structure your notes to mirror the syllabus. So dot point information, kind of like in that structure. So staying on top of your notes is the best way to ensure that you don't fall behind in the HSC, right? So it's less stress, happy times, good marks. Really, they all are correlated and all go hand in hand to be able to achieve success in this subject, right? So, for example, we've got legal representation and legal aid, which is one of the dot points, and then you just kind of put your summary dot points or your summary notes under that, and then you go into the next syllabus dot point, for example, burden and standard of proof. So then you have your summary notes. Okay, what are those things? Again, use of evidence including witnesses is a syllabus dot point. Under that, you've got just a summary of the notes of that, so that, for example, a couple of days before your exam, your assessment, whatever it is, you can just read over that and then have a high-level overview of every single syllabus dot point. And remember, you cannot be assessed on anything outside the syllabus, so you're basically covering 100% of the content that you could be assessed on your exam, your assessment, etc. Hopefully that's making sense, but I would highly recommend that you use this technique to be able to achieve basically 100% coverage and to be able to feel a higher level of confidence going into any exam or assessment, which I know I did because I utilized this method. Okay. So HSC prelim, I normally, whenever I do these lectures, I get a couple of questions in terms of the difference. So I thought I would just kind of put in a little slide just to emphasize the difference or, be able to explain the difference. So structurally, the HSC syllabus isn't overly different to the prelim syllabus. So if you are currently in prelim watching this lecture, that might be comforting to know if you are finding the prelim syllabus okay to go through. There is a greater expectation that you do refer to the syllabus in the HSC, because again, when you start going through HSC exams, you see every single question is from some part of the syllabus. So knowing the syllabus, really, I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to know it and to understand it and to memorize it and to make sure that you know every single dot point in terms of content for every single dot point that there is. HSC requires detailed and extensive understanding of each dot point, whereas that may not have been the case in prelim, because remember, there is no external exam in prelim for most students, right? Like HSC is like the main external exam. For some of you, trials can also be an external exam. You may have had external exams if your school had bought papers from outside, but really the HSC is like the main one that everybody has. So some of you may have had exams in prelim that do still refer to the third dot point here, which is the detailed and extensive understanding. But remember that HSC emphasizes it so much more. So make sure that you are aware of that in terms of, going into year 12. HSC requires well-researched and accurate legislation, cases, and media. I can again not emphasize this point enough either. To be able to know and memorize and learn different legislation for different dot points, different cases for different dot points, and different media for different dot points was so integral to my success in this course, right? So I would highly recommend that you do the same. So something that I did was, for example, if I go back to the syllabus slide, for example, legal representation, legal aid, you see how I've got a case there? There's a case there. So I would literally put, you know, mark this up or highlight this so that it was evident that that was my case. I would always put my case in a way that it would separate from the content or the notes of the content. So for example, this is just an understanding of what this is, but then this is the actual case, which you can tell because it's in the box. So you can even highlight it a different color or make the font different or whatever it is so that you can differentiate the case from the content. And then you can also do the same for legislation and media as well. So in that way, again, you've got that syllabus structure, so you know that you're getting 100% coverage, and then you've also got cases, legislation, media for every single dot point as well. So I think that's really important to make sure that you understand, and I would highly recommend using that method because it definitely helped me you know, make my life a lot easier in terms of being able to integrate these into my notes, which I know I often also get a lot of questions surrounding how to, I guess, be able to memorize such that many legislation, that many cases, that many media, and people don't really know where to start from. So I would highly recommend going dot point by dot point and then being able to weave that in. Also, where do you get your legislation, cases, media from is something I often get asked, sorry. Again, go dot point by dot point. You can definitely have a look at your textbook, which is what I did. I would always read up on the textbook and see what the textbook was saying for that particular, I guess, topic. So for example, apologies. So for example, legal representation and legal aid, 100% I know that this case will be in the textbook because it's like the most popular case for this specific topic or dot point. But I would also then go and search up what I could potentially see online about it, especially for media, because I don't think media is as prominent in most legal studies textbooks. I think that's something that I would highly recommend that you just kind of search online and see what articles you can find. And also for legislation, I think textbook would be your go-to, but then you can also do additional research. But I would highly recommend additional research more so for cases. If there's not a particular case that you are really understanding or that you can't find in a textbook, is to do your additional research online or through you know, other websites, like you can have a look at Ostly, things like that, which I've also got a link in this presentation for, I believe. So yeah, for those two, look at the textbook. If you can't really see anything that you're understanding or there's not really much in the textbook, definitely have a look online, and I'm sure you can find many articles, cases, etc. Talking about different areas. Yeah, so that is sort of a well-rounded summary of, I guess, the main differences that I wanted to highlight. So yeah, a little bit of a in-depth also into legislation, cases, media. I wanted to dedicate a slide to this because I know I get questions on it again, just to emphasize that making sure that you have legislation, case law, media, and international instruments also apply. They may just not be as common, but I would still recommend that you have them in there. So yeah, you will definitely need these for your essays, and sometimes you may want to incorporate them into your short answer human rights answers, especially if they are more than 4 or 5 marks, then I would highly recommend, or if they're 5 marks plus, then have the you can have like an example of a case, or like mentioning a legislation, or mentioning a media piece, but mainly the legislation, case law can be helpful. But for essays, you would probably need to integrate most of these, and by most of these I mean definitely the first 3, sometimes the 4th one. Depends on the question. Sometimes questions emphasize international instruments, sometimes they don't, so that's a little bit up in the air and up to you depending on your question and depending on your knowledge and your expertise in terms of how you would approach that. So having a well-researched and accurate example to support your writing is absolutely critical. So having those examples, having those cases, legislation, media can help support what point you're trying to make, because at the end of the day, you're making some point. For example, if your question's asking you to make a judgment, so that's just allowing you to back it up and just showing the marker that you know what you're talking about, you've done your research, and that you can, continue on and explain how you're able to get your point across. So I think that's quite important and something that I wanted to quickly emphasize. All right, legislation. So your teacher will usually give you the relevant legislation. So normally I didn't really go and research more legislation. It's kind of just like the common ones that you will have. So your job isn't really to research legislation, but to just memorize it and remember it, which I know can be hard for some students, but just making sure that you put in the time, and don't leave things to the last minute in this subject, because it's a lot of content and a lot of memorization, so you don't want to leave things to the last minute, because I guarantee you it will be very difficult on the day before your exam to memorize legislation, cases, media, etc., and content for all of those subjects, for all of those, dot points. That will be that will be a very tough ask for anybody, so please don't leave things to the last minute. However, if you feel like you want to do a little bit more research into legislation, I've got a couple of links there for you to access as well. Okay, case law. Again, you don't need to read the entire case law judgments. This is not expected of you. These are hundreds and hundreds of pages. If you plan on taking law in university, then you can definitely save it for then, but please don't read hundreds of pages. You don't need to be going into that level of detail. All you need to really know are the basic facts and the issues and the decision. Those are the three main things. So what are the facts of the case? What's the issues that have arisen? And then what was the decision, right? What was the verdict, for example? Case law should be used to illustrate legislation being applied or highlight the effectiveness or ineffectiveness of the law or in the law. So, for example, you have a certain piece of legislation, you have a case where the judge will apply that piece of legislation, and then you go, actually, that was a really effective case because we were able to achieve a balance between victims, offenders, and society, for example. Or that was actually a very ineffective case because our moral and ethical standards as a society were not really met, right? So that's an example. And again, you may be wondering where those terms are coming from. They're all coming from the syllabus. The best place to access case law, again, I've put in the link there. I was just mentioning it a little bit earlier, but OSLI is a really great place to sort of access different cases. Again, when you click on the cases, it will be hundreds of pages of notes. You don't need to read all of that. Just get the main three things, which is the facts, issues, and the decision. Media. So media can comprise of anything from a newspaper article to a podcast to a documentary to an online opinion piece. The main one that I used is the newspaper articles. So you could say the Sydney Morning Herald, and then you could like quote the title of the piece or a specific quote from the article. But again, all of those apply. I also had a few online opinion pieces on different topics or dot points where there was controversy surrounding ineffectiveness or effectiveness of the law, because that will help me answer the question of effectiveness, ineffectiveness, right? So media is typically used to demonstrate your awareness of a current affairs, but Also, to add a scholarly argument or point of view, you're basically showing the marker, hey, look, I'm not just waffling, I know what I'm talking about, I've done my research, and yeah, I can go into detail and in depth in terms of my understanding of the specific dot point or issue or topic, especially if you're making a judgment, right? If you're arguing that actually the law is only partially effective and there are areas of ineffectiveness, then you could say, and this is shown through this opinion piece or this article. So how to find media. There are a couple of ways that you can do this. First of all, watch the news, right? SBS, ABC, whatever you want to watch, just, you know, turn on the news and have a look. Read the newspaper, right? Make sure that you just have any form of access to the news. I know reading the newspaper sounds like ancient, but really, you can even, you know, I guess subscribe to an online newspaper if you want to, but really, just having any access to any form of news. My favorite was to just download a news app so that I could just subscribe to some of the news, like forums, or like, I don't know what you call them, like news companies, I guess, like Sydney Morning Herald, ABC, SBS. The Conversation is a really good one. For opinion pieces, is to just subscribe to them, and then if you have a certain topic, then you can also look there, or you can just every day just scroll for like 5 minutes and have a look at what's trending or what's making the news and seeing if that relates to anything that you that could possibly help you in your essays or that you could include in your notes. This is really good also for subjects like economics, where you also need to keep up with the news, so it can be something that you can implement for other subjects as well. And to listen to podcasts such as A Law Report, Please Explain. I know ABC also has a couple of podcasts where they're educational. So yeah, if you're into podcasts, that can also be a way to get your daily dose of news. But yeah, essentially just making sure that you are aware of what's happening currently within the law, what changes are being made, if there's any reforms being made, and then if you're doing subjects like world order or human rights, obviously human rights everyone's doing, but if you're doing the option of world order, just keeping up to date with the news that's going on around the world as well in terms of the law, the UN, etc. Alright, others. So international instruments should also be used in essays. So these include things like treaties, conventions, declarations, covenants. These are typically made at the UN level. So you can definitely have a look and just search those up. They shouldn't be too difficult to find regardless. Statistical data as well is always a good one to have up your sleeve, but it's not essential really. So you don't have to, but if you want to take that extra step to go above and beyond, you can definitely have a look and see if you could integrate some stats, but you also have to memorize them, so try and make sure that they're not too complex so that you can remember them. Also keep an eye out, as I was saying earlier, on law reforms. So Law Reform Commission reports, which will normally highlight where the law reform is coming from, what it means, etc., and royal commissions into issues that are affecting the community in Australia. So you could have royal commissions into a wide range of things, but normally it's like issues that impact the community. So for example, I believe we had one with the banks and their lending practices. I think we also had one in relation to our aged care system, which is quite flawed. So a lot of the systems that majority of people believe are flawed and that need to be looked into and examined in a deeper way and audited almost. Basically there will be a royal commission into that, and those are always really, really interesting and provide great insights into you know, different areas of the law, especially ineffectiveness of the law, which I really wanted to emphasize. Ineffectiveness. Effectiveness is normally something you will be asked at some point in your exam, so making sure that you're aware of that and that you can talk about that to a sufficient level, I think, is quite important. All right.